Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Serugo Paolous from Kyambogo University, Department of Development Studies. Our host today from Somero and your partners, the head of department. I'm delighted to be here in this dialogue on education and sustainable development, looking at what civil society organizations can do. I begin my presentation by giving some highlight on what education means, and education as the uptake we can have. We are focusing on knowledge and skills, but these knowledge and skills, in one another, the emphasis is on how can they enhance sustainable development. When we talk about education, when we talk about education, we are in one another talking about formal education that normally culminates into acquiring a qualification and a certificate. We have informal education, and also we have what we call non-formal education. And all these, we are saying that there are processes that are important in terms of building the capabilities of the people, in terms of people having the choices, having the freedom, and also trying to see how can people do what they want to do in terms of improving the quality of life that they want to have. In this, we are saying that we cannot talk about education without focusing on the global agenda, or first of all, looking at what we call education for all. We have the MDGs, also one of them is focusing on education. We have the Sustainable Development Goals, especially goal number 4 on quality of education. And then also we have, for example, some frameworks in Uganda. We have the education white paper. We have the universal primary education. We have the universal secondary education, and other frameworks which are guiding the education policies in Uganda. But we are saying that when civil society come in, as Dr. Msingus has highlighted, the civil society, we are talking about a number of institutions, not basically NGOs, but these are mainly voluntary organizations that come together, and we have, for example, the community-based organizations, we have the associations, we have labor unions, we have bilateral development agencies, and other partners who are engaged in the work of development. And these, we are saying that they come in, especially to fill that gap where government is not able to provide the services in terms of improving the lives of the people. But these civil organizations work at what we call major levels. One of them is the moral level, in which these organizations are aiming at raising the moral consciousness of the people in terms of the morality. And this is where we find issues to do with maybe corruption, issues to do with abortion and post-abortion care, and the other voices that maybe are not approved by this community in terms of the ethical codes of conduct. But other organizations, other civil organizations are working on the economic level in terms of improving the economic sustenance of the people. And lastly, we are talking about the political level, which is about the political consciousness of the people. And today we are talking about civil society and the sustainable development, in which the political space, we want to see how do we open the political space in terms of people participating in decision making, decisions that are important for the welfare, the well-being of the people, and more so the decisions which can enhance sustainable development. When we talk about sustainable development, we are talking about how do we meet the needs of the present generation without compromising what the future generations are going to have. And the needs of the present generation in many times have been compromised by globalization and economic development and the other challenges, which at times are natural calamities. And then we are saying that as the present generation, we need to see what do we do? What do we put in place in terms of sustaining what we consume, that also others who are going to come after us can also are able to meet their needs. The executive director talked about the trees maybe which were planted long ago. Also, we are talking about so many, maybe, for example, the fruits we're enjoying. Many of them were planted by so many generations, but we are saying, are we concerned that also, as we are consuming, those ones who are to come are able also to meet their needs? Those are important aspects of sustainable development. And in doing so, we are saying that when we look at education, we are talking about knowledge and skills. What do we need to put in place? Which kind of education do we need for us to have sustainable development? And we are emphasizing what we call inclusive education services. And these services, as we have seen, that many times civil society organizations, others are supporting formal education, but also they integrate it with non-formal education and also the informal education. All these are important in terms of enhancing skills and knowledge for the people, for them to be empowered, especially when we are looking at the vulnerable groups and communities. Some communities are living in conditions which do not enhance their dignity, that they need to be assisted in different ways. And we are saying that civil society organizations, in doing the inclusive education services, they implement projects that are aiming at enhancing the voice of the marginalized groups, the voice of the vulnerable groups. And in this, we are saying that the education that civil society organizations put in place, many times focusing on localizing the environment in terms of going to the communities. And I'm happy that today here we are gathered at a function when civil society organizations have decided now to come to the university. That now they are building synergies of how can they work with the universities to see that the interventions they implement in the communities in one another become meaningful in a sustainable way. We are also saying that civil society organizations in providing inclusive education services, they have been advocating for gender equality in terms of, for example, encouraging people and parents to take their children to school. We have seen civil society organizations advocating or having interventions that address early marriages. These are issues and experiences which are very many in our communities. We have seen interventions on gender-based violence, and also civil society organizations are supporting people living with disabilities. All these are issues to do with inclusion in terms of how do we reduce the social and economic inequality that are prevailing in our communities in different ways. And in this, we are saying that when we do inclusive education, we are also enhancing fairness. We are also talking about solidarity, that how do we live and support those members of the community who are not able on their own to support themselves. Another kind of education we need is also focusing on issues of environmental conservation, the campaigns that I need to put in place. As you have heard that today climate change is a reality, it's affecting us in different forms. But then we cannot simply sit behind and observe. We need to take action. Action, as we have seen, that mostly our country is an agricultural country, but many times the farmers engage in unsustainable agricultural practices. We have seen issues of deforestation, burning of bushes, and the extreme temperatures that we are having. We are saying, what can civil society organizations do in terms of conserving and preserving the environment? And this is an important aspect for which, for example, civil society organizations can form clubs in schools, clubs in universities, and these clubs essentially can put in place activities that aim at planting trees and also waste management, the plastic disposal, which also in one another affects our environment in many times. And we're saying that we can do this also by use of the IEC materials. IEC, I mean issues to do with information, education and communication materials. For example, t-shirts, brochures, banners, and maybe putting dustbins in which the people can dispose of the waste in different ways to manage it. Otherwise, waste disposal management is a big challenge in our communities and also in our environment that is affecting us in different ways and affecting the unsustainable ways. in which people are living. Again, we are saying that civil society organizations can, in providing sustainable education, they can support in material provision in terms of especially paying scholarships, in terms of improving infrastructure, rehabilitation of some facilities, and then also providing learning materials, because we see that especially in the rural areas, many times the children are not able to go to school because they are lacking these basic requirements of attending school. So I think that when we provide the material support, it also lessens the cost of education on parents, and most especially when we see that most of our parents in the villages are not having economic sustainability in terms of income that they can use to provide for education. More so when in Uganda, we are talking about privatization of education, where most of the private schools are charging high school fees. Many parents are not able to afford, but as we talked about solidarity as a value in civil society organizations, we can see how can we, in one another, help the parents in terms of meeting these costs. And we are talking also about vocationalization of education. As we have seen that mostly many interventions are focusing on formal education, which aims at having a qualification. Sometimes some learners drop off and others end up being neglected. But when we engage in vocational education, you find that the learners acquire skills, and these skills ultimately will bring about possibilities of employment. People will get income, and as a result, we shall see economic inequality reducing to some levels. And in this, we are saying that when economic inequality reduces, also the people are able to have different alternatives in terms of sustaining themselves. And as we have seen that as we talk about sustainable development, in which we are looking at the environment, we are looking at the society, which has us, the people, and also the economy. Many times, because of poverty, people are using the environment unsustainably. But when poverty is reduced, we assume that somehow also the environment will be managed and will be conserved to some level. So we emphasize that let people get the skills, let people get opportunities for them to have income. And we are saying, how can we do this? We can do it through persuasion and empowerment of communities. Persuasion, especially in terms of encouraging our community members to develop a positive attitude towards education, and this can be done through different dialogues. Like today we are here in this dialogue. Possibly this is how so we can take it to the communities. We talk about workshops, we are talking about meetings, and also we can have conferences and home visits in terms of trying to see how do we encourage people in the communities to appreciate the values of education. When the community is empowered, we are saying that also empowered communities will be able to participate in the political space. The political space which brings about deliberative democracy in terms of people participating in the decisions that address their needs. And when people are empowered, also we shall also enjoy the inclusion benefits that people will be able to share their needs, and most especially those political decisions that are important in the social distribution and also important for the management of the communities. And we can do this by using, for example, what we call the community radios. Community radios become an important tool for us to disseminate information and also to campaign for whatever activities we want to have in the communities. And also, we can do this by using the community celebrations in terms of either it is a marriage or it is a funeral. You can use it to disseminate information in terms of the campaigning for education, and also in terms of working against or sensitizing people on the stereotypes and prejudices that affect educational attainment in different forms. What do we need to put in place? We are talking about the advocacy agenda. We need advocacy. advocacy for sustainable development, advocacy for inclusive education. And this advocacy also works hand in hand when we engage in collaboration. Collaborating between the local and the global partners in terms of attaining the common goals. And this advocacy, we are talking about advocacy that emphasizes fairness, that emphasizes justice. Advocacy that emphasizes solidarity. That also emphasizes subsidy, especially when you are looking at education as a public good. That is important for the realization of the common good. And the common good, we are looking at how do we work to realize those conditions that are shared and are beneficial for everybody to live the good life. Because without the common good, we cannot live in dignity. And we are saying that the dignity is compromised by different ways, and among them is a lack of the capabilities for us to function, for us to perform, and to do what we want to do. So we need to collaborate with others and also networking. We network with others. We are talking about CSOs, we are talking about civil society organizations. And when we are networking also, it has an advantage of avoiding wastage of resources and also avoiding duplication of activities. So that when we come together, we are able to know which partners are implementing which programs and which projects, and also we are able to see outcome, which is important in terms of addressing the challenges, especially of the underprivileged people who are living in different communities. We are talking about frameworks on monitoring and evaluation of the education programs and policies. And here I'm emphasizing what we are calling public expenditure monitoring in education funds. Here we find that many times the government provides funds for education, but these funds encounter different challenges in terms of either there are leakages along the way, the funds are being dispersed from the Ministry of Finance. Also, we are talking about the delay. At times, there's a delay in dispersing these resources, which also affects the quality of education. And also, we are talking about, in terms of public expenditure monitoring, that the communities can be empowered in what we are calling community-led procurement. The involvement of the community in one another contributes also the sustainable use of resources, which are important for the learners to acquire education. And in this, we are emphasizing accountability and transparency in terms of working with different partners as we aim at providing education for sustainable development. We need to note some key things about education. We are saying that education should aim at capacity building. We are talking also about mobilization of funds. We talked about collaboration, transparency, and problem solving. They need to empower the communities to see how can they develop those critical skills for them to solve the problems that are happening in their communities. And today we are saying that among other problems, of course, we have to do with the corruption. We are talking about climate change and also other challenges that bring about social and economic inequality. These are issues which the community, when it is empowered, is able to address using their own resources and also with themselves as participants in addressing challenges that prevail in their communities. We're talking about self-reliance and promoting stability and financial security as important issues in having education that enhances sustainable development. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your time.